everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. I am joined right now in my wonderful, beautiful recording studio in Uptown Charlotte by Kristen Weil. Now, why are we talking to Kristen Weil today? She is the founder and editor of Unpretentious Palate. I am a subscriber. I'm a fan. I suggest if you have a passion for the restaurant business, you become a subscriber and a fan as well. Before that, she was a senior editor of Charlotte Magazine, editor, producer for NASCAR, Washington Post, you name it. She's got a lot of great experience. Kristen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to tell everybody about Unpretentious Palate.
I'm excited to hear about it as well. Obviously, I am a subscriber, as I mentioned. I love following your stuff. I feel like I'm almost cheating because in my business, I love staying on the cutting edge of the restaurant world, and I feel like you're like a cheat code for me. So I need an exclusive. No other people in commercial real estate should be able to subscribe. Can we work that out, pleplease?
That might cost you a hefty price tag, but I think we could figure something out.
It's going to be a subscription plus model at that point. Well, Kristen, do me a favor. I want to hear two things right off the bat before we get started, or as a start. Tell everybody what exactly Pretentious Palate is, but I'd like you to back up a little bit before there and just tell everybody about your background, how you became a food writer, why you became a food writer. We've spoken many times before, and the passion really comes out. And I'd like people to kind of get a sense for who you are and why you started this really unique, at least to the Charlotte market, production.
Yeah, so I went to school in Washington, D.C., American University, and my senior year there, I got a job at the Washington Post working in the mailroom. And so I had one of those old school starts to my career that you don't see so much anymore. But I was working there in school. I was the 6 a.m. person there delivering newspapers to the editors with my little rolling cart and sorting mail. And I fell in love with journalism there, and just working in that newsroom gave me such a sense of pride. And I had my little badge that I would wear on my pocket so that everybody could see it said the Washington Post on it. And when I graduated, I started working in the Going Out Guide. So that was kind of my first, other than the college paper, my first entrance into feature writing. And what I loved about it was there's something about food and entertainment writing that, it can be seen as kind of fluffy, but at the same time, you're telling people what to do with one of their most valuable assets, and that's their time. And so I fell in love with it, fell in love with journalism, and I ended up coming down to Charlotte several years later and working at NASCAR, which wasn't exactly the right fit for me. I learned a lot about the business side and different aspects of writing and content, but it wasn't that journalism that I loved. The Post is such a separation of church and state kind of newsroom, and going to a place where it was a little bit more, sponsor driven, made me pretty uncomfortable. So Michael Graff hired me as senior editor of Charlotte Magazine, where I covered food was the main beat, and I fell in love with it, and I spent the first couple months just eating everywhere, going and sitting down with all the chefs, introducing myself, just really digging in as much as possible. And I found that as much as I loved food writing here in Charlotte in particular is very interesting because it's such a tight-knit community, and there's a lot of talent, but there's a chip on the shoulder of the city, trying to get up there with some of the bigger cities. And It was fantastic, and I loved my time at Charlotte Magazine. I was editor there after Michael left, and in that time, the food kind of had to take a back seat because I was managing the rest of the magazine, and it was a lot. And I was, talking to my husband about how we could make some sort of business model work. And I think that's the problem with journalism right now is when you're giving away content for free online, there's no reason for people to pay really anywhere unless you're offering something different and something that people see as valuable and worth paying for. And so with Unpretentious Palate, we decided we were going to just say, everything's $5.99 a month. If you want to read it, you get no free stories. And I've gotten a lot of crap about that. People are like, why don't you be like the New York Times? They give you a metered paywall. And it's like, yeah, well, they're doing 10,000 stories a month. So them giving you, 5 free articles is pretty easy. But for me, if I'm giving you a couple free articles a month, then you're going to pick and choose the things that you really want to read and then never pay. So it's been we're been in business now since September of last year, and it's been a pretty successful business model so far. It's subscription based. It's a twice a week newsletter. You get the newsletter for free, but to get into any of the content, you have to pay. We have a lot of reader resources. So if we have a weekly Q&A, for example, where if you are looking for a specific restaurant recommendation or a weird dish, or you find something at the farmer's market and you want a recipe for that, we'll answer your questions for you each week. And I think that adds another layer of value where, like, I will be there for you if you have a question. Like, you reach out to me directly. It's not just like this mystery of this giant publication. It's like, the staff, who we are, and you see us out and about. And then we also do events, which are restaurant previews for the most part. And then we also do these Meet the Chef events. And those are really cool because our readership is so niche that it's a really valuable audience. If you're a restaurateur opening a new place, we bring in some really dedicated Charlotte diners. If they're paying each month to read about food content, then that they're going to be a good critic, because we seek everybody's feedback at the end of the night. And if you impress them, they're going to come back because they're obviously dining a lot. And so it kind of works both for everybody, because for me, I get to show Unpretentious Palate subscribers these restaurants before they open, and then the restaurants get feedback. And, a lot of times when you have these family and friends nights, it's like, oh, this is so great. What a great restaurant. The food is great. Everything's great. This is the best. You're going to do great. And we bring in people who, are willing to give you the constructive criticism that sometimes we lack, because Charlotte is so nice. So we do a whole bunch of things. And I've found that if you're writing quality, researched stories about something people care about, they're willing to go in on the paywall and support you financially. And it's been a really fun journey so far.
Very cool. So let's dive in. A couple things that you said have given me some ideas for questions that I really would like to ask. First off, I'd love to know how you've seen the Charlotte restaurant scene change since you moved down here. What year would that have been?
2013.
2013. So call it last 7 years. And also, you mentioned Charlotte having a chip on its shoulder. Maybe wanting to play with, air quotes, the big boys like Charleston. I mean, I'd put Atlanta in that category. Even Asheville has a tremendous amount of like per capita restaurant scene. New Orleans, Chicago. Walk me through that chip on its shoulder and what that means and what other chefs have told you about that.
Yeah, so I think Charlotte is in a really interesting place because. So I was at recently there was a summit at Haymaker in Uptown, and it was a James Beard Foundation hosted conversation, and there was a representative from the tourism board there, and she mentioned that the number of people who come to Charlotte just to visit family and friends makes up a majority of our tourism, which I thought was really fascinating, because when you have cities like Charleston, Asheville, New Orleans, Nashville, a lot of people...
It's a tourist destination.
Yes, right. And so I think that has a lot to do with the food scene, because like Nashville, it's high on my bucket list to go to Catbird Seat. And, that's going to be like next time I go to Nashville. Yeah, and so... But I'll
Get your
probably...
reservations early.
Yes, I know. I made that mistake one time. I was going, and it was kind of a quickly planned trip.
If you're a total nerd, look up Catbird Seat. There's a dozen seats. You sit around a counter in an open kitchen. There's no walls in the whole place. You don't order anything. Everything is brought to you. The chef signs the menu at the end of the night. I think I still have my menu sitting around here somewhere. It's quite the experience.
Yeah, so things like that. And I have reasons to go to Nashville. I'll probably be there for a bachelorette party, or someone's going to want to go for a weekend. And Charlotte, unfortunately, doesn't quite have that yet. I think there's just not much of a tourism draw here. We're not in the mountains. We're not at the beach. We're a great city. And I think you see that with all the people that move here after visiting family and friends. So I think that's part of the issue with the food scene, is that we don't have people coming here who are going to go back home and spread the word and be like, oh, when you go to Charlotte, you have to go to these restaurants. But I think we're getting a lot more attention now. I mean, even like things like the last couple months, there have been 2 chefs on Chopped on the Food Network. And we're getting more James Beard semifinalist nominations. We haven't won yet, but I think the way that system is, it'll take a while, but I think we're slowly getting there. It's going to be harder for Charlotte as a city because we're not that tourist destination. But I mean, it's unbelievable to think about the changes since I started at Charlotte Magazine, and the number of restaurants opening each month, I think, is unsustainable, but exciting. And I think, people say Charlotte might not be on the level of bigger cities yet, but the more restaurants that open, the more it'll push out the restaurants that maybe aren't on the level that we want to be at as a city, and just keep pushing us forward.
I wonder, or I don't wonder, I would, my counterpoint to the tourism aspect of that would be, I mean, I do think that density cures everything. I mean, Charlotte, from a retail and from a restaurant perspective, it does not cure everything. It doesn't cure traffic and the downsides of density. But from a retail and restaurant standpoint, density is kind of a cure-all. And I think that Charlotte is growing into a real city. And I think that South End is kind of a microcosm of that. It feels much more kind of big city vibe, metropolitan vibe than anywhere else in Charlotte. And I think that you'll start to see more and more restaurants that want to be associated with that vibe, even if it's Flower Child, which is a Sam Fox restaurant, an extremely successful restaurateur from Arizona who's now opened 2 concepts there. I think that you'll see a lot of other chefs that once they have the Super Ricas and the Flower Childs, the Okus that other cities maybe had for a little while, but it's a little bit of a stamp. Like, okay, if they're going there, I should look there also.
Yeah, and I think too, if you look at what's happening in Noda, like Noda is becoming, I think, in terms of chef-driven restaurants, because I think, like South End, the development has been great, but then it really changes the kinds of chefs and restaurants that can open there. And so Noda, you've got the Goodyear House opening. I think when Paul Verica opens Orta there, that will, that whole corner. There's talk about some other great chefs taking up base over there. So I think it's interesting to see as development increases how the saturation of chef-driven restaurants, locally owned restaurants, small places, and then like the bigger restaurants kind of come in once it's popular. And I think that's something that most cities are struggling with now too, is that for restaurants, food costs are going up so much, labor costs are going up so much. In Charlotte, rent has skyrocketed compared to what it was. And I think that's really having an impact, especially in a city like Charlotte where so many apartment buildings are going up. Those are, those are really big spaces, and you can probably speak more to, whether it's feasible to divide these up into smaller spaces for restaurants to open in, but it really limits the people that can open in the city proper.
Yeah, and I do think it's funny that I was on with the CLT development guys earlier this week, and he kept touting that, like, oh, we need smaller spaces, smaller spaces, smaller spaces. And it's not that I disagree with that, but I've built restaurants, and everybody thinks going into a restaurant is like, oh, man, they spent so much money on that chandelier or these booths or blah, blah, blah. That is peanuts compared to the infrastructure that goes into the back of house, what we would call the back of house, the kitchen, the hood system, the Ansel system, the grease traps, the HVAC, all the stuff that you get no credit for that costs insane amounts of money. So you look at like an Optimus Hall, I mean, the amount of infrastructure that goes into a development like that to make smaller footprint restaurants is unbelievable. And as a landlord, speaking from the landlord point of view, which obviously I'm on the other side of the table from restaurateurs sometimes, insane amounts of cost, insane amounts of management, and you have 10 people you're chasing around for rent or for whatever. So it can be a challenge, but I would love to see more kind of fringy small restaurants, right? Like Fremore West or these other areas that maybe aren't there yet. Like, I'll give you an example. Like when Pinky's opened.
Yeah.
Right there on the corner of Freedom and Moorhead, that there was not a lot going on that corner, right? And all of a sudden you had them kind of drop that flag, and people just got it, and people were willing to patronize them because it was a cool ass little restaurant,
right? Well, too, and you look at Paul Verica opening Heritage out in Waxhaw, and then once that restaurant. He put in the work out in Waxhaw, and then guess what? He had plenty of investors that wanted to support him coming into Charlotte. So, but it's interesting because I did a couple months ago, I did a story where I asked a couple restaurateurs in town who had multiple restaurants at what point they decided to expand to a second restaurant and what people should know when they grow. And Katie Kindred made a really interesting point that basically, to your point about the cost of management, that Hello Sailor brings in much more than Kindred does, which surprised me because Kindred is, the James Beard nominated restaurant. It's all of the accolades go to Kindred. But she was saying because of the size of it, they can basically do the same number of staff, but manage way more tables. And most of the people I spoke to for that story said that having a restaurant that's less than 100 seats really isn't sustainable given the cost of everything. So it's one of those things where like you want those cool trendy restaurants, but at the same time, it's hard to be successful. I think with Aix-en-Provence closing, that is kind of an indicator of that, right? Like they were doing everything right, it seemed, but just couldn't make it work.
Well, and you look at restaurants. So I'm a total restaurant geek, right? Like I do this for a living. I drive my friends crazy when we go to restaurants because I'm paying attention to steps of service and yada, yada, yada. And I spend a lot of time with very, very intelligent restaurateurs, more so on a bigger scale, a little bit more corporate scale. And I love walking in. The first time I walked into Bardot, I was like, oh, especially after I tasted the food, I was like, oh, hell yes, I love this. But then I'm like, oh my God, like there's 40 seats here.
Yeah.
And the food is so high touch, so high prep. It scares the crap out of me from an investment standpoint. So I don't know how you could do a restaurant for under 100 seats unless you're using that as a springboard to get the next thing, right? Like, okay, this is what I can afford. Let me open this. Let me knock people's socks off. Tread water, and then open one that's 180 seats.
Oh, because Havana is going to be much bigger than Bardot. And another thing that Bruce Moffat mentioned to me for that same story was that with Barrington's, he was there, basically he was almost the entire kitchen. So I think with like Bardot, you have Mike Knoll in the kitchen and Jason and Whiteside, the GM, that, since they're the owners, that cuts a big chunk of their payroll. And so I think that helps a lot, but at the same time, like, then you're grueling nonstop, and there's really no end to it because as soon as you step out of the kitchen, you're paying somebody what would have been your free labor. So, I have so much respect for these guys. I don't know how chefs do it, but thank goodness they do because it's really special to go to some of these restaurants. I think Bardot does a great job. I'm excited for what Paul's doing next. There's just so much exciting stuff happening in Charlotte.
So what are some other chefs? You've mentioned, some important guys. What are some other people that are doing things that you see that are kind of elevating the game here locally? It can be a chef, it can be a restaurant group, it can be just who do you think who has your attention right now?
So I think what Goodyear House, what they're doing is going to be really cool because they have plans to like almost take over that whole block of Noda. And so their vision, should it pan out, is basically have those 3 properties in a row, their old mill houses, convert them all to restaurants, and then kind of the area behind them all will become like one big connected area. And I think that will be really interesting to see how that all comes together and how 3 concepts that close together, like whether they cannibalize each other at all or whether it just becomes like a giant party destination back there. There's Chef Sam Hart is putting together a concept called Anomaly, which I went to a preview dinner of, and it's kind of the vision is kind of Catbird Seat-esque. It's going to have very limited number of tables, or not even tables. So it's going to be like a U-shaped bar with the chefs in the middle, essentially, and they're kind of one-on-one. They're the ones that are serving you your plates. The courses are pretty out there, modern cooking, and they're going to open in Dilworth. The hope was next spring. Openings never seem to go on schedule, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes with a tasting menu only concept, that modern style in Charlotte.
And where is Kevin now, or where did he come from? What's his background?
Sam Hart, yeah.
Sam Hart, sorry.
He actually,
Kevin Hart. Did I really say
you
Kevin
did,
Hart?
yeah. I was like, why does that name sound familiar?
Yeah, huge movie star,
Yes.
opening
I don't know that I'd want to eat his food, yeah. So he was at Foxcroft Wine for a while. He was at Heirloom with Clark, was like his first job. He started as a dishwasher with Clark, and he's staged. He most recently was staging in Chicago, and he worked at Alania for a while. So he took some time in that kitchen to learn from them, and did stages at several Michelin-starred restaurants up there. And the preview I went to was at somebody's house, so it wasn't the full experience, but they're really trying to do some cool stuff, and I'm excited to see how it comes together. Like, every course will be paired with music, which I think is really interesting, and there's so little you can do anymore, I feel like, to innovate with a dining style, but I think that was really fun, like the way the soundtrack really fit with the meal, and Aaron is going to be managing the wine program there, who also came from Foxcroft Wine. They worked there together, is where they met. So it's going to be cool. Sam's really ambitious with it. And the dishes were really playful. Like, there was one that was, it was a shredded chicken with mole, but it was done in a way so that, like, it looked like you were eating a drumstick, and then, like, you broke into the shell, and then the mole was on the inside.
That definitely sounds like an Alania.
Yes,
vibe.
yeah. So, but that's the thing, is like, when you start saying it's kind of like I worked at Alania, then people expect Alania, and like, we're not going to get Alania for a while here, like. So I'm really. It should be cool. It should be really cool, and they're doing very limited reservations. So I'm hopeful that it'll be one of those things where the limited availability of the seating kind of drives a constant traffic, because Charlotte doesn't have a tasting menu only restaurant, which is crazy. But when Heirloom switched to an a la carte / tasting menu, that was the only tasting menu only spot. So hopefully it's sustainable here.
So let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Like, what's just your, give me something that's not Alenia. Give me something that's just,
like, things I don't love right now?
No. Well, we can do that too. Hell, let's piss some people off. I like it. No, give me like your go-tos for just middle of the fairway. Like, I'm not feeling good. I want some comfort food. Like, I just want, like, my spot. I'm not talking about a $300 person. I'm gonna blow the budget on the wine. Like, what's just like, give me your just Tuesday night spot.
So Tuesday night spot, not feeling well, would probably either be Intermezzo. It's like, just
every time.
I love that place. Or
eggplant moussaka for the win.
Yes. Oh, so good. I love that place. I can't get enough of it. And we live in Plaza Midwood, so it's like just also very close. And then Yaffo's another, like, just go to, don't have time to cook. But if I am feeling well, my husband John and I love Dogwood. We love to sit at the bar at Dogwood. So you can often find us there.
You're reading off my flashcards right now.
Right? Yeah. So we love Brian. We like to go there and get the burger happy hour special. So, yeah, that's a lot of people. I feel like I see so many people there, too. So it's like networking hour at the Dogwood Bar.
So give me one or two of your major turn-offs when you're at a restaurant, and one or two of your major turn-ons. Like, I'll give you. I'll cheat. I'll break the ice on this one. So, absolutely makes my freaking skin crawl when someone hands me a glass by the rim.
Oh, that's the worst.
Like, they're grabbing the glass where I'm about to put my mouth, and it's like, dude.
Yeah.
Like, just common
I don't even do that
sense.
at home with my own cup.
Yeah, but like, steps of service aside, like, it's just common sense.
Yeah.
So that would be one of my like skin crawling moments. And then something that actually makes me really excited. Again, it's so simple. It's just like a thank you or a, hey, my waiter or waitress introducing themselves. Like just simple steps of service that to me really matter. But give me some from your playbook.
So turn off. I am a big whiskey drinker, and I hate when I go to a bar and it's a craft cocktail bar, and I'm like, oh, just make me something. I like spirit forward drinks, and they still give me like a disgustingly sweet pink something just because I'm a small female. Like that makes me so furious. It's like I told you what I like, and you're basically going to tell me that like I don't know what I like. That just puts me in a mood for the rest of the night. Something that I love is when something's clearly not right on your plate and the server like notices and tries to make it right instead of just kind of pretending that they didn't notice. That happened to us one time at Little Spoon. Actually, we ordered the slab bacon, and it was just like way overdone, and it was tough and not good. And she was like, "How is the bacon?" And she looked down. She's like, "Oh my gosh, like that does not look right. I'm so sorry. Like, let me get you a new one." And she brought back the fresh one that was like perfectly cooked, and it was delicious. But like, had she not taken the time to just look at our plate and see like this should not look that way, we would have been like, that was disgusting. I don't know why anyone would order that. And the second time we were like, oh, this is such a good piece of bacon.
So when you're doing a review, walk me through, is it like a checklist? Is it just like the vibe that it gives you? Do you have like this certain filter that you run every restaurant through? Is it proprietary? Would you have to kill me?
No,
if
I would
you
not
told
have
me?
to kill
Like,
you. I'd be happy to tell you.
Run me through like your checklist.
Yeah. So there's no like real checklist, but so we have some guidelines. We go at least 3 times. Reservations are always in friends' names, or we just walk in, or we'll just sit at the bar. I try to make them as anonymous as possible, but like sometimes, I don't go in costume or disguises. So sometimes I'm spotted, but it's very, very
rare. You don't go
rare.
in like a penguin outfit?
I do not. No. Yeah. I go as a penguin. John goes as Adam Sandler. So I just try to kind of be like low key and sneak in. And most of the time, I mean, there are very few restaurants in Charlotte where staff is trained to like see me, or like Kindred. I cannot go into Kindred without them noticing. So that's like one of the reasons why I haven't fully reviewed Hello Sailor yet, is like I can't go in there and it be anonymous. So I got to have somebody do that for me that's less recognizable. But basically, it's hard when you're reviewing restaurants all over the spectrum, because like Sweet Lou's Barbecue is one of our higher rated restaurants. But it's like, how do you review that compared to like a Pepper Vine, which is a totally different experience, but also very delicious. And so I try to envision like what this concept would be like if it were the best version of itself. And that's kind of the standard I go by, just to make it across the board. I can review any restaurant that way.
So there's a little more art than science, you would say.
Yeah, yes. And so, we do star ratings, and we divide them up into food, service, and vibe. So, I think that's the easiest way to do it, because those are like very tangible pieces to it. And I think going back multiple times really helps, because it tells you when they just have a bad night versus there's a serious problem. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel comfortable not being entirely like in disguise when I go out, is because a restaurant, like even if they know I'm there, if I go 3 times and I notice the same things every time, there's a problem. And they're not going to nail it every time if they seem. So, I think it's... Basically, I'm just looking for, if I were to come to this restaurant, if I were to recommend it to somebody, what are the things that I would want them to know, or what would I have wanted to know before coming here? And the reviews are kind of all over the board. Sometimes, it's just kind of like you said, it's more art. Like there's some reviews that are more like emotional and fun. There are some that are more, like about the chefs there. I mean, they run the gamut. Just kind of whatever I think fits that restaurant and what people would want to know about it.
So you mentioned the tasting menu. You mentioned some really sophisticated stuff that maybe Charlotte is lacking. What is either a brand or another style of restaurant that you think Charlotte needs, or maybe there's a hole in the market? What else do you think that is just an opportunity waiting for somebody to capitalize on?
I would love to see. So I don't know that it's Charlotte would necessarily support it yet, but I think doing some more high-end international cuisine Charlotte still kind of has that stigma of if it's
Steak and potatoes.
Yeah.
In the middle of the fairway.
Right. Yes, exactly. So I think, I would love to see some more high-end Asian restaurants that are doing, like, there's a place in Raleigh called Brewery Bhavana. And
So cool.
yeah, like I just wish we could have that in
Vitamanda
Charlotte.
next door.
Yes. So, like high-end dim sum would be really cool. Dim sum options, we have like 2 in Charlotte. So I think getting some more of that and having a community that supports it. I think, when Comida opened, whether or not you thought the food was good, I think like the fact that people saw tacos and saw like a $13 price tag on 2 small tacos and like kind of lost their minds, like
They were little.
They were very little. But then it's like, how much do you want to pay for somebody who's, getting organic corn and milling it back there and somebody's actually forming, with the masa in the kitchen, like they had a tortilla maker just working back there full time. So I think, I don't know, I would love to see more of that. Just more respect for international cuisine.
So what do you think, and you've already been very, very gracious with your time, and I very much appreciate it. But let's get back to the business side of things. What do you think is the number one problem or challenge facing either an existing restaurant or a new restaurant that's trying to get their legs under them?
I would say labor costs is
and lack of labor.
And lack of labor. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think there's so many places opening, and you mentioned Super Rica and South End, and I wrote a story about labor costs rising, and I spoke to them, and they basically have this whole university system where like they bring people in, and if you're a server and they recognize you as a talent, they basically put you through this university program where you can become a GM at a future restaurant. And you've got healthcare and you can have paid vacation time. Small restaurants, just like they can't afford that. And so, this
is a very sophisticated group out of Atlanta. I mean, they're
yes.
considered one of the best chef-driven restaurant.
Yeah, Ford Fry restaurant. Yeah,
in Atlanta, FYI. So,
yeah,
I mean, for people listening.
Yes, it's great they do that, and I think you see that in the consistency there, and
the fajitas are banging.
Yeah, and it's a fun vibe. Like, nobody's going to be like, oh, Super Rica is like really pushing the culinary envelope, but you go there, it's consistent, the food is good, it's fun, it's a beautiful interior, it's a good, reliable spot. So I think the labor will be the killer, but it's also sucks like these kids coming out of school who have a ton of debt from culinary school, and then they get into this career path where you're never going to make that much money, and so many chefs are like, yeah, I wish somebody had told me like I should just work in kitchens and stage instead of going to school. But I think we live in a time where everybody has to go to college, whether it's culinary school or not. And so these kitchens, they're gonna keep struggling until we figure out a way to, and the people in kitchens deserve to be making more money, but diners don't want to pay for it. So if we don't want to pay for, all of the work that's happening behind the scenes, then who's going to do it?
It's a big problem, and when unemployment is as low as it is now, I mean, restaurants get hammered. It's a big challenge. So, I want you to tell people how they can connect with you, how they can find you online, how they can get more information, how they can subscribe. Just explain to people how they can find you. If you want to be found, if you don't want to be found.
I would love to be found. Thank you. No, so you can find all of our stories at unpretentiouspalate.com, and that's palate like your tongue palate, Palate. There are a lot of ways to spell palate out there, but that's the one we're going for. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us on social media. And you can sign up for our newsletter for free if you just want to check us out. As soon as you go to the site, there will be a pop-up asking you to subscribe to the newsletter. So we'd love to have you as a newsletter subscriber, and hopefully you find value in our content and want to be a paid subscriber.
All right, I'm going to let you go after this, but we're going to have a couple little quick...
A lightning round?
Quick lightning round, exactly right. Favorite whiskey and go-to drink. And I know you're a whiskey hound. We've talked about this many times.
Yes.
So what's your go-to whiskey? It can be any type of whiskey. And what's your go-to drink right now? And I know this changes a lot.
I know. I have so many. So our house drink tends to be in the Weller family. probably the Weller Antique just is a good everyday sipper. But we probably have like 300 bottles in our home bourbon collection. So it's very rare that I'm drinking the same thing. I'm also a big fan of the High West Yippee-Ki-Yay. I think that's a really fun one. I'm also a wine drinker, so like that one to me is a good branch of the two. Current favorite drink. So actual cocktail in Charlotte. We went to ... last week, and I had the sweater weather, which is like really fall-y, but it's also an egg white cocktail, so it's nice and foamy. I don't know why I love egg white drinks. At home, we have some mini barrels, and my husband did a black walnut Manhattan. That is delicious, and so that's probably my favorite right now.
Still looking for my invite.
Anytime. You're welcome. We have this baller bar now, so now that we have a baby, it's like we got to drink at home more. So, yes, those would be
That's
my
what
two.
everybody has to look forward to for parenthood. You don't stop drinking; you just drink more at home.
Right? Yes, we're the place to hang out.
All right, go-to wine.
Go-to wine. So
you can be go-to wine or go-to
yes.
wine spot in Charlotte, but you can't go easy like Bohemian just because it's down the street.
No.
From
So can I say favorite wine that like I had and love and want more of, but I can't really find
anymore?
anymore?
Okay. You say whatever you want.
I got 3 bottles of Domaine Delacote, which I don't know if you've seen the most recent Somm, but one of the Somms there, he does a Pinot in Oregon, and it is freaking amazing. And I only got 3 bottles, and I'm so mad because there aren't any more, but it is incredible. So tasty. That's one of my go-tos. And then Saintsbury is much more easy to find, and that's another Pinot I really like. Favorite wine spot? Probably Bond Street, just because they have so much quirky stuff there, and I love their tastings. I think their tastings are just like they're really unique. You get a great value, and it's fun. It's not stuffy. It's just you kind of pop in there and have your wine and learn some stuff and head out.
All right, hidden gem in Charlotte, like this random restaurant that people would think you're going to punk them when you bring them to, but it's actually Rockstar.
Chubb's Chili Burgers.
All right, you got me.
Yeah.
You got me.
It's next to a strip club.
I just did a project next to a strip club, so I've got no problem with that.
Yeah, so I got to give a shout out to Peter Taylor and Miranda Brown, a photographer and pastry chef in Charlotte, who first turned me on to this place, but probably not the right word to say when it's next to a strip club. But it's right where Tryon meets Woodlawn in that strip mall there, and it's kind of like an In-N-Out burger, but it's owned by these 2 guys. One is a Johnson & Wales grad, and they make their sauces in-house. They press their patties in-house, and the chili burgers are just so damn good. I mean, they're amazing. I love them.
I love that. I can't. You absolutely got me on that one.
You have to check it out. Let me know what you think.
I'm absolutely.
And then you're going to have to take a nap, though, because you're going to want to get a milkshake, and you're going to want to get the chili cheese fries.
I'd have to get carried out of there.
Yeah.
All right, one more. What is your restaurant, and you can't have already mentioned today, that you take people when they're in from out of town?
Ooh. That's a tough one, because I feel like I usually take people
lightning
where
round's
I
no
need
joke.
to go. I can't have mentioned it already. So
Are you trying to go back to Dogwood?
You knew it.
I know that. I do. That's one
Yeah.
of mine. Not to give John Dresser a big head, because he
Right.
does not need any help
No.
with that. He's a shit talker.
Let's
Talking to
see.
you, John.
Probably Earls Grocery is one. Common Market's another one, and 300 East. That's multiple, but I guess it depends on the person,
That's fair. All right, Kristen, thank you so much for joining me again. Want to take a second and acknowledge you taking time out of your day to come and explain to people what Unpretentious Palate is. Again, I'm a subscriber. I'm a fan. I remember when I used to be cool and know all the spots and all the up and coming talent, and I am not cool anymore. I'm old and have kids and am tired all the time, so I'm out of the loop. And Kristen tries to keep me cool. It's an everyday struggle. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.